Good morning. Happy Pollinator Week. It is National Pollinator Week, and we've been celebrating all week long on our Facebook page. And now we're here to have just a little nature minute so that we can talk about pollinators. So behind me is what everyone thinks of when they think of pollinators. They think of honeybees, right? Honeybees have been in the news a lot lately, and a lot of people think about honeybees when they think about how to save pollinators. Well, I'm here to talk to you about some of our native pollinators and some other cool things about pollinators as well. So you can go back into our other live naturalist chats on our Facebook, and we have a whole series on butterflies and of bees and native bees and honeybees, and so you can look back on our Facebook page and learn more about those things. One of the things that you'll learn if you go back and look is that our honeybee friends are actually not native. They are vitally important to our food supply, and so they have a very important economic impact on us. But when we're talking about pollinators, especially those that are in trouble, we think about our native pollinators. A lot of our native pollinators don't get as much attention as the honeybee, and they are in trouble. So for National Pollinator Week, we're talking a little bit about the diversity of pollinators too. So did you know that 80% of all flowering plants and 75% of the world's food crops rely on animal pollinators? That's huge. So especially when we think about food that we eat, 75% rely on animal pollinators. Now, there are 200,000 different types of insect pollinators. That's crazy. There are, just in North America, 4,000 types of native bee species. That's not including the honeybee, which is our non-native bee friend. We also have 1,000 vertebrate pollinators across the world. So that includes things like hummingbirds, bats in the western United States, even a really cool little gecko, different types of mammals. There's a lot of diversity when it comes to pollinators, and it's important to recognize all of them. Now, we think about bees, and we do have a lot of really cool bee species that are here in Alabama. A lot of different kinds of bumblebees, of native bees like mason bees, miner bees, leafcutter bees. These are all vitally important to us. We also have hummingbirds. We have moths. Moths are really important nocturnal pollinators. And then wasps. People don't think about wasps, but wasps are important pollinators too, and they actually form two very important functions. One, they go to flowers and they collect pollen, and they use that pollen to eat or sometimes to feed their young, depending on the type of wasp. But they also are carnivores as well. Well, technically they're omnivores because they do eat plant things and animal things. So the animal part of their diet is catching insects and spiders and other invertebrates. Some of those invertebrates could be pest species if you're growing a garden. So wasps can be very helpful in both ways. They can pollinate plants, and they can catch insects that could be harming your flowers or your garden. So wasps have a very important role to play as well. There are a few other kinds of pollinators that we don't think about. What about gnats? There's a whole group of gnats called fungus gnats that are helpful pollinators. Mosquitoes actually have been found to pollinate all different kinds of orchid species. There are all different kinds of beetles, which are prehistoric pollinators. They're the earliest pollinators. Beetles are responsible for the pollination of other ancient plants like water lilies or magnolias. Who's enjoyed smelling a magnolia this summer? Thank a beetle for that. Midges are responsible for the pollination of chocolate. Have you had a chocolate bar lately? So there is this whole variety of pollinators that need our help and that we have to think about in terms of helping them, and not just our bee friends here. Now, there's a couple of cool stories that we can talk about with pollinators, and especially some unusual pollinators. Have you seen a yucca flower? You can look up yucca, and if you know what it is, I know you've seen it along the roadside. Well, there's this really cool moth called the yucca moth, and it lives in perfect harmony with the yucca flower, and they have a very complex symbiotic relationship. So the yucca moth actually visits the yucca flower. The female gathers up pollen from the yucca flower, and it has to go to another flower to cross-pollinate. The yucca moth takes the pollen with its specialized little mouth parts, goes to another flower of a different plant, packs that pollen into the flower, and then lays an egg in the flower. So it has to lay just one egg, or else the yucca flower will abort the fruit and it won't produce. So the yucca moths have evolved to be able to use just one flower for one egg. When they lay that egg, the yucca flower is then pollinated and it turns into a fruit. And the yucca moth's larva will feed on the seeds of the yucca flower. So that's really cool, because if it lays too many eggs, then it's not going to have enough seeds to feed all of its babies. So it works to where you have a flower that is helping out this pollinator, and the pollinator is helping out the flower, and that's symbiosis. It's really neat. The yucca moths are only active when the yucca flowers are blooming. There's a lot of neat stories when you see how plants and pollinators work together and how they form these special relationships. So when we think about pollinators, we think about the threats to them. So just butterflies alone, the monarch butterfly is decreased by 90% in recent decades. There's 960 different plant species that rely on just wasp pollination. That's pretty impressive. And then we have a 19% of butterfly species in the United States are at risk of extinction. So we have all these cool pollinators and we have all these cool plant relationships, but we also need to think about how we can help them. One of the big things is habitat loss. So just by having a lawn with no flowers in it or anything like that, it's not providing anything for wildlife in general. So by planting native plants, or by participating in No Mow May, which is where you don't mow your lawn for the month of May when a lot of different flowering weeds can come up, just by doing some small things like that, you can have a big impact. Just providing habitat for these pollinators is important. And even though you might want to use different kinds of insecticides on your garden, just learn how to use them responsibly. So using a powder kind of insecticide is really harmful for things like bees because of their fuzzy bodies. When they land on a flower and it has powder insecticide, that gets all over them, and so that can kill them. Versus if you use a spray and you spray at night when beneficial pollinators are not flying around, you can actually not harm them, because by the time that the liquid, if you use a liquid, it dries. By the time the pollinators are flying, you can have less of an impact. So little things can add up to make a big difference, and that's what Pollinator Week is all about. To learn about the pollinators that are around you and to learn how you can have an effect on them and how you can make a difference. So I hope you learned a few things about pollinators today. I hope that this might inspire you to plant some pollinator flowers and to look around and observe the diversity of pollinators that we have here. So if you have a little garden, you have some pollinator flowers and things like that, just take a look around. I really enjoy this pollinator field. Let me see if I can pan around behind me. We have all sorts of flowers. It's hard to see from right here, but just walking through on my way here this morning to do this video, I saw so many different kinds of pollinators. flies, wasps, bees, butterflies, all different kinds of things. And so take a look around, notice what's around you, and appreciate it, because it impacts you and I, and hopefully we can do something positive to impact them. If you have any questions about pollinators or what you can do for pollinators, then please send us a message. Ask us your questions. Leave a comment here on this video and we'll get back with you. We want to help you in any way that you can so that you can turn around and help the beautiful wildlife that we have around us. Hope you come out and visit us. The Natureplex is open. Our Discovery Hall is open. You can walk the trails. You can look at the beautiful pollinator field that we have. You can come and visit our apiary to peek at our honeybees and see what they're doing, and hopefully learn more about Alabama's wildlife. Do us a favor, please like and share this video, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.